sanctions don't work, Europe is weak, and the West has labeled Russia an enemy. This is the narrative the Kremlin is spreading, not only to its domestic audience, but also abroad, and European experts help amplify it.
Научный директор германо-российского форума Александр Раhr. Добрый вечер, Александр.
Здравствуйте. Очень высокопоставленный немецкий политик, когда я его честно спросил, говорит, а почему мы воюем с Россией? Почему мы ссоримся с Россией? Вот в чем? Тот же самый вопрос, что вы мне задаете. Он мне сказал такую фразу. Он сказал, а тут на Западе воюют с Путиным, потому что он воюет с педерастами.
One of Vladimir Putin's most prominent admirers in Germany is Alexander Rahr, or, as Kremlin sympathizers are sometimes called here, a Putinverstehers, literally, Putin understanders.
Я думаю, что Россия просто и начала вот эту войну, чтобы показать, что она великая держава, что она может противостоять Западу, наказывать Запад за расширение НАТО и так далее, и так далее.
Who is Alexander Rahr? A journalist, historian, political scientist, professor at Russian University's MGMO and the Higher School of Economics, advisor to Gazprom, member of the Valdai Discussion Club, and chairman of the Eurasian Society. But, above all, Rahr is Putin's biographer.
По-прежнему Путин для меня так называемый немец в Кремле, политик, который особенно смотрит и особенно надеется на то, что Германия будет неким таким проводником таких общих интересов на Западе.
Though Rahr has spent most of his life in Germany, he has Russian roots. His family emigrated from the Soviet Union to Latvia before World War II. He speaks Russian fluently and visits Moscow regularly. For example, he is a frequent guest at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum.
Диалог надо вести равным образом, по-другому. Нужно говорить о том, что Россию тоже интересует, о традиционных ценностях.
Rahr often recounts his 2001 meeting with Putin, after which the St. Petersburg Dialogue Forum was created as a platform for informal communication between Russian and German politicians and business people.
Я думаю, что этот разговор просто по политическим причинам не получился. Это было примерно 10 лет тому назад, и мы начали все больше и больше расходиться, потому что ожидания были самые разные.
In interviews, Rahr repeats familiar narratives. Sanctions harm Europe more than Russia, and Russia itself, to its own detriment, is portrayed as an invented enemy. He promoted the Kremlin's agenda not only on Russian channels, but also often provided commentary for Western audiences in German media. However, after the full-scale war began, Western media invited him less frequently.
Нас ждут очень сложные времена. Извините, я хочу быть оптимистом, но я вижу, конечно, что ситуация тут не меняется к лучшему. Был шанс, как мне кажется, все-таки для нас всех, кстати, чтобы договорились бы все-таки Трамп и Путин о каком-то мире на Украине. Я в это надеялся. Украина не капитулирует, по-моему.
And yet, Rahr prefers to admire Putin's Russia from Berlin. Another expert on Russian TV, who is presented as a foreigner, is Alexander Sosnovsky. On Vladimir Solovyov's show, he is introduced as the editor-in-chief of the German outlet World Economy. Solovyov enthusiastically argues with this particular guest.
Кто поставляет оружие на территорию Украины? Народ или власть?
Не надо на меня кричать.
Кто поставляет оружие? Народ или власть?
In propaganda shows, Sosnovsky appears as a specialist on Russian-American relations, and he doesn't hesitate to call himself a German.
Это называется демократия. Как только немец берет слово, сразу американец его перебивает.
Sosnovsky is a very versatile figure. He can speak on all sorts of topics, most often on those pushed by Russian propaganda. For example, he talks about how Germany interferes in Russia's internal affairs, speculates about who blew up Nord Stream, and criticizes German chancellors, sometimes revealing his shaky grasp of the facts.
Она не имеет никакого влияния на политику. Она была в партии. Она выступает хорошо, она красивая женщина. У нее очень умный муж. Я не знаю, кто не знает ее. Простите, о ком речь? О Саре Вагнер.
Sosnovsky often travels to Moscow for studio appearances. But more often, he joins from his apartment in his beloved Germany. Yet, he stays silent when Solovyov, live on the air, calls for wiping German cities off the map.
Сейчас Deutsche Welle показывает, как горит Волчанск. И они в ужасе от этого. Вы понимаете, что так будут выглядеть города Германии? Только к ним мы будем гораздо жестче. Мы просто все снесем.
Sosnovsky's love for Germany doesn't stop him from making openly outrageous claims, such as insisting that no peace treaty exists between Germany and Russia, that Germany is now extremely weak, and that if war broke out, Berlin would fall in a matter of days.
Что при нынешнем объеме и количестве военнослужащих Бундесвера Германия продержится 6,5 дней.
After such statements, German media heavily criticized the expert. Police even came to his home to check on him. He was expelled from the German Society for Foreign Policy. Sosnovsky called this a violation of free speech.
Что это за история с омерзительным наездом на тебя?
Ну, понимаешь, это наезд не на меня, это наезд на свободу слова, и это фактически нарушение статей всех важнейших статей немецкой Конституции.
Long ago, Sosnovsky set up a clinic for alternative medicine in the Krasnodar region. That medical experience later helped him to interpret Alexei Navalny's poisoning. Sosnovsky claimed there was no Novichok involved, and that even German authorities doubted the poisoning. He could have had insulin added either to his coffee or to his water, a hormone that cannot be detected as an external substance in the body. But the administration of insulin can rapidly lower blood sugar to a level that causes this comatose state. You can judge the level of his expertise for yourself. For instance, he tried to prove that Navalny was never at Charité Hospital. To do this, Sosnovsky went to look at the clinic without even going inside. He didn't see Navalny from the street. So, he concluded, Navalny was not there. Navalny is not here, of course. You see this giant building behind me. There are no balconies here, and the view seen from Navalny's balcony could never be seen from this building. Who is Sosnovsky really? He was born in Kiev, earned an engineering and economics degree in the USSR, and worked as deputy director of a machine building plant. In the 1980s, he moved to Germany, where he went into journalism, writing for various publications. For a time, he was a correspondent for the news program Vremya. At the same time, he gave lectures on international relations, but he was never able to build a truly successful career. Therefore, Sosnovsky also worked as a psychotherapist and organized international KVN games. A few years ago, he created an online publication with the grand title World Economy. In reality, it's more like a personal blog where Sosnovsky discusses conspiracy theories, and only a few hundred people visit the website each month. Not thousands, just hundreds.
That the Germans now seemingly think that they can attack Russia without Russia retaliating. Now, this is a very dangerous gamble.
Glen Dyson, political scientist and professor at Southeast Norway University. But he is known less for his scholarly work than for his pro-Putin statements on RT broadcasts on YouTube and channels in 6 languages. He criticizes Western governments and almost verbatim repeats Kremlin propaganda narratives.
The military on the front lines is just going from bad to worse.
Yes.
Economically, it's also going very poor.
Dyson defends the Kremlin's actions and blames NATO for provoking the war in Ukraine. In broadcasts and articles, he promotes the idea of a multipolar world and predicts the inevitable decline of the West.
The West, especially the United States, still pushing hard to restore the unipolar moment, but that's only intensifying other countries' initiatives to establish more of a multipolar system.
Dyson began speaking at international conferences and writing books about Russia back in the 2010s. From 2017 to 2020, he taught at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow, and in 2018, he became editor of the journal Russia in Global Politics, where he still publishes today.
President Putin, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. My question was about Finland and Sweden having joined NATO.
Since the start of the war in Ukraine, he has become an even more active critic of the West and increasingly appears in Russia not as an academic, but as a media expert. His name can be seen among those invited guests at the Valdai Club, the Eastern and St. Petersburg Economic Forums, and conferences in Kaliningrad and Moscow. In 2024, he even visited Belarus for the Minsk International Conference on Eurasian Security.
We should spend more time in formats like this to speak with the different parts of this greater Eurasian space.
In Norway, Glen Dyson has been criticized for working for Kremlin propaganda under the guise of academic connections. An investigation by the publication Filter Nyheter showed that his trip to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum in 2023 was paid for by Think Arctic, a Russian Congress-linked organization. Dyson himself claims he did not know who sponsored the visit, and that he simply participated in the event as a scholar.
Stopping visits to Russia and even, say, rejecting Russian culture carries a dangerously negative impact. I believe more and more people are realizing the error of this approach. But unfortunately, it remains very problematic.
Идет, конечно, подготовка народа, в том числе финского народа, к большой войне. Если смотреть того, что происходит в Финляндии, уже пропаганда в финских средствах массовой информации имеет уже невыносимый характер.
One of the Kremlin's biggest admirers in Finland was Dr. Johan Bäckman, a social scientist and political activist. In Russia, he is presented as a human rights defender and a fighter against neo-fascists. Bäckman criticized NATO, speaks about Russophobia in Finland, and denies the existence of Ukrainians as a nation.
European experts, Western analysts sometimes need a doctor, not because they have their opinions are so Russophobic and anti-Russian that I think the question is about an illness.
Bäckman claimed that journalist Anna Politkovskaya, who was killed in 2006, suffered from depression and supposedly arranged her own murder. Later, Moscow invited him to serve as an independent election observer and frequently welcomed him on state TV. In 2014, for example, he monitored the referendum in Crimea.
Well, it was a free election, and I think that the United States and Russia can agree with the fact that the majority of Crimean people wanted to join Russia.
Furthermore, in 2014, Bäckman announced the creation of a Donetsk People's Republic office in Finland and headed it himself. He organized trips for Finnish volunteers to the Donbas, presenting himself as an expert at the Russian Institute for Strategic Studies. This organization, according to media reports, employs intelligence officers personally appointed by Vladimir Putin.
Главная проблема, конечно, это западная пропаганда сейчас. Это именно пропаганда западных СМИ, которые врут о том, что происходит в ДНР.
Since then, he has become not only a regular commentator in Russian media, but also a provider of news stories that discredit Finland and the West. As journalist at Helsingin Sanomat discovered, between 2014 and 2020, Bäckman submitted more than 90 pieces of work and press releases to the Russian state holding company VGTRK. He is being awarded by Yuri Yevgenyevich Safronov, Secretary General of the World Alliance Peacemaker. Russian propaganda portrays Bäckman as a fighter against fascism and radical neoliberalism, as well as a defender of Russian families whose children, he claims, were illegally taken by Finnish authorities. Meanwhile, Bäckman himself has faced legal troubles in Finland. In 2018, the Supreme Court found him guilty of harassing a journalist who wrote about Russian troll networks. Bäckman was handed a 60-day suspended sentence. Bäckman also tried to enter politics. In 2023, he ran for the Finnish parliament with the pro-Russian party Power Belongs to the People, but he received only 400 votes.
Well, I think that the Western media is waging war against Russia.
Ultimately, in 2024, after receiving Russian citizenship from Vladimir Putin, Bäckman moved to Moscow.
The Insider's journalists continue their work despite pressure from Russian authorities. You can support them by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel. If you'd like to further support their efforts, consider making a donation by clicking the link in the description below.